Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on weird and mysterious, true glitch stories, including the paranormal. This is my weekly compendium of case reports between the 10th to the 15th of February, 2021. Case files 49 to 54. Case file 49, written by user Tani the Adventurist, details a peculiar, seemingly impossible elevator in an old home. Then it was gone. Where did it take its passengers? I was 15 or 16, 33 now, and babysitting my teacher's 2 daughters. It was time for them to go to bed and they shared a room. They were getting situated and I was getting ready to tuck them in so I could go out and watch TV for a while. Wild thornberries, snagging some downtime. I was standing by the door talking to them for a minute and promising we could play whatever they wanted the next time I was over, when I heard music coming from their closet. I figured some toy was going off in there, because I had made them pick up their room earlier, and just assumed they shoved most of the toys that were out into that closet. I asked them what it was, and the younger girl looked at me shocked and said she was surprised I heard it, then turned to her older sister, who was staring at me as well, equally surprised. I thought they were trying to play a joke on me, so I played along and went over to the closet and whipped open the cheap closet door. It was one of those closets that have sliding doors, so you can only access half of the closet. The type where the door always slides off the track, but what I saw inside was something I can't wrap my mind around. It was what I now recognize to be an elevator from the 1920s or 30s era. 2 big velvet box benches lined the walls with the same color carpet, red. I remember the walls being gold and extremely shiny, with a ton of white round buttons for all the different floor buttons. I remember the gold wall being extremely reflective, but not being able to see my face reflected on the back wall, due to the panel having small round perforations, kind of like a vent cover or a speaker. I remember not feeling scared per se, or maybe the right word is terrified. I was a little freaked out, but I wasn't terrified. From the angle I was standing, the closet stood directly adjacent from the door to the room. The girls could not see what I was seeing, being to the far left side of the room, so I slowly closed the slider, then opened it again. It was packed to the max, with plastic tote storage bins and clothes. The interesting thing, and it could have simply been from my reaction, but the older daughter asked me simply, but very seriously, "What did you see?" I ended up telling them because it seemed like they knew something, and she told me she had never seen it, but the younger one had. She could hear the music though. They then begged me to let them come lay out in the living room with me. We all piled on the couch and watched the wild thornberries until they passed out and their mom got home. I never brought it up to the mom. I never asked the girls if they brought it up to her, and she never brought it up to me. I babysat them several times after, and never had another experience. I had asked them at one point if they thought their house was haunted, and they told me they weren't sure, but that part of their house while being moved had gotten lost in the forest somewhere. Like it had been moved, and then forgotten in a forest for weeks. Again, this is from the mouths of young children, so I'm not quite sure what that means. But they thought it was important enough to mention, so I will too. I would love any suggestions as to what you may think was going on here. I know it happened because I spoke with the girls about it on several occasions after the fact. I know at least it wasn't some crazy vivid dream. Also, I remember thinking to myself, I won't permit myself not to believe this happened, so I made sure to study it while I was standing in front of it. I remember the inside of that elevator vividly. And lastly, there is no history of mental illness in my family history that could account for a one-time hallucination or delusion. Case notes, file number 49. So to me, the fact that the children in this home also knew of what you were speaking, well, one saw it and the other just heard music related, that's what solidifies the story in my view. Whenever there are corroborating witnesses, even children, it piques my curiosity. Especially when they're not led on to a conclusion. Did you happen to have time or even the thought to try pressing any of the buttons in the elevator? Of course, it's the fact that it vanished after closing and opening the closet that's what really sends my head for a spin, Actually, I get the Chronicles of Narnia vibes reading this. Perhaps there's some kind of lore that book series was based on, closets leading to other realities somehow. The author responded to my comment, saying, "Wow, very interesting take, thank you. I never did have the inclination to interact at all with it. I often think, what if I had gotten in?" I asked the younger one if she did, and she told me no. She said by the time she went to get her sister and show her, it was gone. If it makes any difference, the younger sister was around 5, and the older one around 8 at the time. Another thing I've noticed about a lot of glitch stories, or maybe it's just the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, but I have noticed a lot of stories where the OP was around the age of 15 or 16. Logically, it would make me think possibly a hormonal thing. But yes, the fact that girls knew about it, without being led to that conclusion, puts that out of the question. Just another note from me. After you stated, "What if I had gotten in?" I actually got a little chill run down my spine while reading it. Might just be my own bias, but that is a little bit more ominous. Maybe it's not a Chronicles of Narnia situation at all. Maybe more nefarious. What do you think? Case file number 50, written by user Mr. Feeling Offender. It was a night out. A plane in the distance is seen. Only, it's frozen in midair. Okay, just to preface, I'm very skeptical of sightings and things of that nature, because it's very easy to fabricate or doctor an image or story. After last night, I'm much more open to the idea that there are some things that we'll probably never be able to explain. So last night, I was taking out our trash bins at around 9:30 p.m. It gets dark around 5, so at this point, it was almost pitch black. I had my dog with me and the 2 bins. As I was nearing the end of my driveway, my dog just stopped and I thought nothing of it. However, in the distance over the hill, there was what looked to be an airplane just hovering, not moving at all or making any sounds. I stared at it for a good 10 seconds and it didn't even move 1 inch. Not even the red and green lights that are on an airplane at night blinked. I looked away for a good 2 to 3 seconds to make sure that my dog was still there and not chasing any cats. And when I turned back, it was gone. No trace of it at all. No lights, no sound, which in of itself is odd because usually you can hear airplanes, helicopters, and jets, etc. from a very long distance due to how open the surrounding area is. Also, there were no clouds either, so it's not a possibility that I just lost it behind a cloud. Now, I would normally just write this off as a star or something explainable. However, the fact there were lights on the wings of the plane makes it impossible to do so. I have no idea what to make of this, and quite frankly, I'm not sure I want to know. Case notes, file number 50. I'm curious if this was specifically a plane glitch or your environment was frozen. I'm recalling a past story where there was a family in a car at a stoplight and they all appeared frozen. All the cars around them too. Even the sound seemed diminished, which you did mention from the plane, but I don't know if this is exactly the same. My theory then was that the server was just updating or something, or was lagging. It had to be paused to buffer. Maybe this also happened. Maybe it's not so much time as our perception of it given the mechanics of the servers we're running on. Case file number 51, written by user Rexland. What he witnessed during sleep defies explanation, far beyond a lucid dream. I am 38. There's kind of a lot to say, so I'll try to make it short, but I think the following is relevant to my story. I started getting attacked by demons when I was around 18. Sleep paralysis, accompanied by evil presences that appeared as silhouettes that are blacker than black. This happened until about 26 or 27. I was using drugs during most of that time, and was dabbling in some occultic things as well. I also want to add that these experiences are what ultimately made me start believing in God, Jesus, and the Holy Trinity. It's the reason I do not still suffer from this stuff anymore. I was 25 when the window thing happened. Using marijuana and pain pills, I was playing around with lucid dreaming, which I've been able to do since I was a kid. I was getting information on a website about how to increase lucid frequency and vividness. Some of these techniques are very similar to transcendental meditation. I was getting pretty into it and keeping a dream journal, trying every night to induce lucid dreams. I read on the forum that if you encounter a window or a mirror in your dream, you should go through it. One night I'm using these techniques and falling asleep, but I didn't truly fall asleep. I was, all of a sudden, floating above my bed in my room. Everything in my room was placed exactly as normal, except my window looks like it was shattered. It's giving off a white light, but not like any light I've ever seen. It's reflecting off my CPU screen and everything else. I can't see my body, but I'm not even looking for it. I'm affixed on the window, had a great urge to get over to it. I remember this being slow and painstaking. I was having to focus to inch over to it. After what seemed like 10 or more minutes, I finally reached the window. As soon as I did, I felt this feeling of pure nirvana for about 5 seconds. I mean, this was like no drug or sex or anything else I've ever felt, not even close. After this fleeting feeling of pure ecstasy ended, I was just somewhere else, some other plane of existence or another dimension or reality or something. This was not like a dream. I could feel the wind blowing and the sun shining on my face. I was amazed that it felt as real as waking reality. I remember reaching down and pulling up some grass out of the dirt, just to see if it would be like real life, and it was. As vivid as this was at the time, most of this is blurry now. I did write all of it down in my dream journal, but it's now long gone. It's been 13 years or so. A few things I do remember is that there was an old house. I can't remember many details about it. There was a stone-paved road heading up a hill to a stone tower. There was kind of a tavern or something inside. There were people, but they didn't seem to be interested in me. That's the last I remember before I woke up in bed. I was so excited, but I didn't tell this to anyone for a long time aside from people on the Lucid Dream forum. I attempted this a little while longer, but never achieved the same results. I eventually stopped and decided I shouldn't be doing this anymore, as I was still being overwhelmed by what seemed to be demons. I didn't want to give them any more license to torment me via the occult practices. I thought the demonic forces were connected to my dad's house, but realized that they were attached to me because they would follow me to other places I moved to. I haven't seen any demons in years, but I have had one supernatural thing happen to me where I'm currently living, that my girlfriend at the time witnessed too. That about sums it up though. The question I'm left with is, what happened? Just something that occurred solely in my headspace, or is it a place that I could go back to, and that other people can access? Case notes, file number 51. Do you know what pops into my head as I'm reading this? It's an older science fiction movie called Contact. In it, the main protagonist is whisked off into the great unknown via a portal ship, which they built from extraterrestrial instructions sent in a signal. During this, she's almost in like a dreamlike state, on a world that is beyond imagining, spectacular in its strangeness, and yet simultaneously tranquil. It was a product of her mind, I believe. But still, she did go somewhere. The camera that was attached and recorded, I don't even remember, but many hours, whereas there was no delay at all. It took only a few seconds for the ship to drop through the portal in the center, and then down below through it. Some people even suspect there are entities out there, able to connect to us via our subconscious, but only when we're asleep or on heavy psychedelics. Are they demons, angels, aliens? I don't know. How did you feel in this ethereal place? Did you feel at peace, or did you feel threatened? The author responded to my comments, saying, I didn't feel threatened or in danger, mostly excitement and the feeling of wanting to stay there as long as possible to explore. I didn't feel like some extraterrestrial world, more like a place that could be Earth but maybe a different time period. Many times in the New Age and occult doctrines, the user is encouraged to take a spirit guide. It can oftentimes appear as an angel, an ancestor, or even an animal. I never got that type of presence. I think the reason is because I knew if I did, it would be a demon masquerading as something helpful. What do you think? Case file number 52, Written by user Monroe Hips Poison Lips. It's a simple walk on the beach with her sister. It turns into reliving impossible events for the time period. I never thought I'd find a place where I could talk about what happened to my sister and me at the beach until I found this subreddit. This happened about 15 years ago. We were on our annual family holiday, and my sister and I decided to go for a walk on the Norfolk, UK beach, which was near us. Our dog Bella, a bichon frisé, loved going for walks, but today she completely refused and would not budge. We just thought it was funny how stubborn she was being, and just went without her. About 30 minutes into our walk, I told my sister to watch out as there was horse waste product on our way. Up ahead we could see a woman with blonde hair on a brown horse, and we both commented on it. As she got closer, she was not on a horse, nor were there any horses around. That was quite weird to us, and we were both sure she was on a horse. Something felt very odd, but we carried on walking. About 20 minutes in, we were suddenly surrounded by hundreds of dead crabs. It seemed odd, but we also discussed that being a beach, it wasn't that out of the ordinary to see dead crabs, just not usually that many. We stopped for a bit just to enjoy the sound of the sea coming in and out. I got this sudden rush of fear over me, looked to the horizon, and saw what looked to be like a torpedo going across the sea line at a steady pace. I started to tap my sister to get her attention, to show her what I could see. She was able to see it too and started to freak out. We genuinely thought the beach was going to be bombed. As the torpedo got to one end of the horizon, it turned around and started to come back. This time, as it circled back, it looked like it was opening up and inflating. I checked with my sister and she too could see everything I saw. The torpedo opened up into what looked like a boat, or what a smaller Noah's Ark would look like. The boat was bright green and yellow, but it felt like we should not be able to see the colors so clearly with the boat being so far away. The weirdest part was that we could see a man on the boat, much bigger than the boat, waving slowly and smiling as he went past. We kept looking at all the people around us and no one else was looking. Once the boat got to the end of the horizon, it turned back into a torpedo, went to the other end, then disappeared. When we got back, my mom was worried as we'd been gone for ages, and she said both our phones went straight to voicemail even though they were both turned on with full battery. We were in disbelief about what we'd just seen. I've tried to research it and can't find anything that remotely touches the subject. If anyone has any ideas, please shout them out. Case notes, file number 52. It's like you crossed into a temporal doorway, or like a looking glass, where you experienced various happenings from past time periods, but only from that physical location, and temporary, of course, as like a random access of historical events played out at a Star Trek holodeck, and they were like blending in and out. And I think you were physically there too in these moments, since your mother was unable to connect with your phones even though they were fully charged, and presumably would be within cell tower reach if you were in your time period. A lot of this does sound like what you'd expect from a heavy dose of mind-altering substances. I'm assuming this is not the case. And again, it's the fact that your mom couldn't reach your phones that makes this so much more peculiar. Case file number 53, written by user Trafalgar D-Law. It's an expedition at night in the rainforest. 40 minutes push by seemingly instantaneously, but only for him. Phone batteries drained. What the hell happened? I've wanted to share this story for a while and finally convinced myself that it would be worth this subreddit's time. This is a relatively mild experience compared with a lot of things I've read on the sub, but it is still 100% true, and it's the strangest thing I've ever experienced. As part of my university degree, I went to the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico to do field surveys in various parts of the rainforest. We traveled across several sites looking at plants, animals, and doing a bunch of tests. This one site in particular was a sectioned off part of the rainforest about 2 miles in diameter that was semi-managed by the government. We went there once in a day walking around the site, did our tests, and then went back to the hotel. The rest of the day we were allowed to relax and study our notes. Then in the evening, we headed back there to study the nightlife in the rainforest. We arrived at the site, unpacked our gear, and paired up with our buddies or groups, then went into the rainforest. We had one torch per group, so a lot of us used the torches on our phones to see where we were going. We walked around the same route as we had in the day, and I was vigilant in checking my phone and its battery because I was terrified of getting lost in the dark in the rainforest. We were just over halfway with the loop around the site, and I was sitting comfortably at about 80% battery, as I had the foresight of fully charging before heading out. Then nothing. The last thing I remembered was admiring the reflection of the eyes of the crocodiles intently keeping watch over our group. Then, when I came back to, I was on the other side of one of the villages that we had seen earlier in the day, alone. My phone was at 1% battery. I was completely separated from my group, and I remember just staring into this old abandoned hut with the dim light of my phone. I immediately started to panic before I heard the laughter from another group on the opposite side of the village, about 50 feet away. I rushed over and formed up with them. When I eventually reconnected with my group, they were worried and said that I was walking along, not saying anything at all, and then when we reached the village, they lost sight of me. It's like I was on autopilot. I've tried to be as rational as I can, thinking about the experience. I was tired, getting used to a new climate, and arguably not as hydrated as I should have been, which could have all contributed to this mental blackout. However, it is important to note that I have a phenomenal memory, as that is how I have learned to study, and to completely forget what would have been a 40-minute walk through the rainforest at night is incredibly unlike me. Thinking back on the event, I still get chills, and the more I try to rationalize it, the more I feel like something unexplainable happened that night. My only comfort is that apart from the fear of being abandoned in the rainforest at night, I never felt threatened or in any danger. Edit. To address some more questions I've received, we were put into groups of 3 or 4, and there were 8 groups there walking in a straight line, about 20 feet apart from each other, with the lecturers leading the front and back. I've talked to a few people and done a few Google searches, and I'm not discounting the possibility that I may have had some sort of physical ailment or dissociative episode. The only thing that still eludes me is how I would have managed to walk away without being noticed by anyone, and how much my phone immediately drained in that short period. Case notes, file number 53. So yeah, the phone battery draining is the detail that caught my attention the most, since outside of that, it's certainly conceivable that a human being could black out for 40 minutes. Though that would still be very strange in an otherwise healthy person. But the battery did drain, from 80% to 1% in 40 minutes. Even with the flashlight open the entire time, at least on my phone, that wouldn't do much, maybe to 50%. And my phone isn't new. I can't explain the battery drain, so it makes me think something else happened here. I know what I want to say. Aliens! But yeah, I'm not sure. Doesn't seem likely either though, because there were so many people around, 30 people. You'd think someone would have spotted a UFO, right? Case file number 54, written by user Paranormal Nexus. What is it like to live in the same haunted house growing up for many years? Find out now. It's taken me a long time to come to terms with what happened in my house in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I'm finally ready to share. To give a little background, my family, mom, dad, older brother, and I moved to Tennessee in 1995 from Mexico. We moved to a very old ranch-style home in Knox County and did not realize that this home would be the site of some of the most harrowing and terrifying experiences I would ever experience. I'm convinced that many occurrences have been suppressed in my mind, but I want to share with you the memories I do remember. My hand is shaking as I type this out, as these experiences haunt me to this day and are not easy to talk about. The activity in the house first began with the usual paranormal stuff you hear about. Missing items, misplaced or moved belongings, strange creaks and noises around the house. Nothing that can't logically be explained away. It wasn't until we decided to add a room to the home about 4 to 5 months in that crap began to hit the fan. I started to experience unusual things a few times a week, to almost every single night thereafter. To give some perspective as to the layout of the home, upon entering, the living room is the first thing you see. To the left is a small hallway leading to my parents' bedroom. To the right of the living room is a very long and narrow hallway that leads to a guest room, then the room my brother and I shared for a short while. The hall ends with a bathroom and the entryway to the kitchen, with an extra room directly across from my brother and I's room. Essentially, my room was on the complete opposite end of the house from my parents' room. Anyways, now that the picture is set, I will describe several of my experiences. While my brother slept in the room, I would experience nightly terrors in which I would see someone standing in my doorway. It would never move, but the only way to describe it was a tall, shadowy figure with noticeably long, white string-like hair. It would watch me several times a week, and I would feel so terrified that all I would be able to do is cover my head with my blanket and pray it would go away. I told my parents what I had seen after the first night, but they merely chalked it up as me having a nightmare. Typical. Eventually, I got to a point where I began to sleep on my side with a blanket over my head, with a small opening for me to look through. This continued on for 2 years until my brother got a room to himself. That's when things took a turn for the worst. I remember sleeping at night and seeing the same shadowy figure standing at my doorway. Feeling just as terrified as the previous time seeing it, I did the usual go-to and covered my face with my blanket, hoping upon covering myself it would be gone. This time was very different. Upon covering my face, the same figure was standing in the room merely feet from my bed. I panicked and covered my head again, wondering if I was going mad. Upon uncovering my head once again, I saw that it had gone, and with a sigh of relief, I turned onto my back. This was not a good move. Upon turning onto my back, I saw the same figure was now floating over my bed on the ceiling. I was on the top bunk, so you can imagine how close it is now. The only way I can accurately describe this humanoid-like entity is that it looked like a mix of gray alien with a very tall crypt keeper from that one show. The second I saw it, I covered my face once again and felt petrified, overcome with fear. I then felt the figure lay on top of me as I lay frozen on my back. I remember hearing it breathing, sounding like a quiet, almost asthmatic wheeze, and how cold its breath felt. I remember the distinct earthly smell emanating from its mouth as it breathed inches from my face, the only barrier being my blanket. It felt like hours passed, frozen in terror, feeling completely helpless. This occurrence was something that began to happen almost every night, and only happened to me. Maybe because I was the youngest. Throughout my time living in that house, things progressively got worse. I would be lying in my bed reading a book with all the lights on, when I would begin to hear scratching under my bed. I would peek under and be overcome with the same paralysis I would feel at night, and the feeling of the figure lying on top of me. I would feel it pull me off my bed and onto the floor in the middle of my room and stare into my soul as I kept my eyes closed in sheer terror. My mom would later recount several times in which she would walk into my room and see me lying in the middle of the room on my back. She would ask me what I'm doing, to which I would essentially snap out of it and tell her I was fine, too scared to talk about what had happened. I remember if I slept on my chest, I would feel like a force would pick me up, 2 to 3 feet, by my shirt and drop me back onto my bed. This happened so often that to this day, I am reluctant to sleep on my chest, not because I'm afraid I'll be picked up. I'm now a 220-pound adult man, good luck, but because something in my subconscious mind tells me that it's not a good position to be in. My parents would tell me that I just had nightmares all the time, but they did not realize this nightmare was something I had experienced every night. Years later, having endured this every night, I began to see an additional apparition in the home. I began to see a young boy in the long stretch of a narrow hallway that my bedroom was situated in. I would see him peeking out of different rooms at me while I was in the hallway, then disappear out of sight into rooms, only to see he had disappeared completely upon my investigation. That would be the extent of my interaction with him, but I would see him often, and only during the daytime. The apparition did not appear to be malicious, unlike the other figure that tormented me at night. He gave me the impression he was merely an observer, which was comforting in a way, that this ghost did not want to mess with me, unlike the Crypt Keeper entity. Over a decade later, now living in Atlanta, I decided to look up the address on Google Maps to show a friend, and noticed that the home was now the site of a home business. Upon seeing that, I decided that I would reach out to them out of curiosity, and see if they had any similar experiences. The business would later reply, saying that there were frequent electrical issues, and that other strange things occurred frequently. He told me that his wife and kids complained about seeing a little boy wandering around the hallway, and were scared to live in the home. The man also described seeing a tall shadow occasionally when he was working in his office, which turned out to be my old bedroom. He told me he always felt like he was being watched and felt generally uneasy in that room in particular. What is peculiar about this is I had not described any of my experiences before him telling me this, yet our stories appeared to line up perfectly. I showed my parents the message thread I had with this business, and it was then that they confirmed that they believed the house was haunted. They didn't want to say anything that would scare me even more, and tried to bury it under the guise that I was having nightmares. My mother said that she would see the same little boy wandering around the kitchen and hallway, and she always had the feeling of being watched when no one was home but her. Neither of them had seen the tall figure, and it seemed it was focused on me. The experiences I had in that home are permanently burned into my mind, and I will never forget that tall, wired-haired figure that constantly picked me up, laid on me, and pulled me around, terrifying me to the core. I don't plan to ever return to that home, and I pray that no one who has the misfortune of living there experiences what I did on a nightly basis for 6 freaking years. I've always been curious about deep hypnosis, and what it may reveal to me, but I'm equally terrified to remember events that my mind deemed too traumatic to keep from my conscious mind. Case Notes, File Number 54. My God, what a distressing childhood this must have been for you. I used to think there weren't any malevolent spirits, but I'm not sure this is the case anymore. This is more than just wanting to hurt you, too. It was pure psychological torment. Sadistic. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, and also subscribe on up. I'm always uploading more of these fascinating stories.